Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
There's plenty of Thunder criticism after the West #1 seed fell, but is it fair? Also, T. Higgins won't be in attendance at Bengals OTAs, and there's no resolution to his future in sight. Plus, the Nuggets' repeat bid ended because they didn't have the legs. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Oklahoma City Thunder are going to have to send a little fruit basket to Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets because the defending champs going out in round 2 gives a little cover to the #1 seed out west, who didn't even make it to a game 7. Rylan Stiles from Locked On Thunder joins me now. And Rylan, there are going to be 2 big criticisms. In fact, they've already emerged of this team this season. And the big one to me is, why, when they had the chance, did they not do anything at the deadline to add a rebounder or do something the way that, say, the Mavericks did? What do you make of that criticism?
Yeah, I think that from the outside looking in, it's obviously fair. I think that internally, though, the Thunder really wanted to get a look at this team, what they were capable of, what this team's identity could lend itself to in the postseason, and give themselves the best possible shot at getting all of the data points necessary to make their next move. That came at the cost of those same issues that plagued them at the deadline, plaguing them in the playoffs. But they have a very wide scope lens view of this. This is a very abnormal team. This is not your typical 1 seed. 2 straight years of 15+ win improvements. Like, they're almost a victim of their own success, of like now people retroactively are getting upset that they lost in the second round. If I told you in October that this team lost in the second round, you'd say that's great progress for a team that missed the playoffs last year and was under 500. Nationally, I totally get that they didn't go make a move to get better at the deadline. They thought Gordon Hayward could get them better as a secondary scoring option. He did not in any way make them better.
Gordon Hayward thought that too, apparently.
The Gordon Hayward thought that as well. Both counts were wrong on that aspect, but they didn't make a move that was impactful. I think it was calculated, though, to make sure that they had all the possible info before heading into this summer, before heading into now the pressure being on. There was no pressure on this team this whole season, and it resulted in 57 wins. But now there is expectations for them moving forward, and there will be for half a decade plus.
Does it make it a little harder to stomach, though, when you look at what the Mavericks did? And even if they don't make a big-ish swing for PJ Washington, like Daniel Gafford, they got for like 4 basketballs and a bag of popcorn. The Thunder could have made a move like that. So understanding all the things that you're saying, and that's certainly going to be the company line, I guess I struggle to understand why you couldn't do both.
Yeah, I think that you could have done both if you're OKC, as you help facilitate that Gafford trade. If the Thunder shoot better.
That's the part that really is sting too. Like, if you're a Thunder fan, you're like, we helped them make this trade.
Yeah. If the Thunder shoot where they were at the deadline, where they have been all season long for the majority of this series, then the series could have gone differently as well. I think that that's a big caveat in this. Like, this system is predicated on hitting threes. You didn't hit threes in this series and you lost. Whereas the whole season they were the #1 shooting team, and you couldn't really predict that these guys would just miss open threes at this point in the season. And it came down to the trade deadline stuff will always be a massive deal. Like you'll always look back on this year and wonder why they didn't do both. But at the same time, you had a big 3 in Shea, Chet, and J-Dub, and 2 of those 3 did not show up offensively for this entire series. And if I told you that at the deadline, that like, hey, you're going to go into the second round and J-Dub and Chet are not going to be there offensively, you'd have said that they lost to anybody, no matter if they went and got Gafford or not. So like, it's kind of a double-edged sword here. They had to just go through the fire with these young guys and let them experience the postseason, let them develop and let them react to it. But you can certainly make the argument that with all the assets that they have, they should have done something, and then they should have zagged from their company line, if you will.
All right. So now they have an off season to get this right. They understand, okay, if we are maybe one or two minor moves away, maybe one major move, if you want to make it away, what do you think is the best way for this team to set about using, as you mentioned, all of the, I mean, they have a war chest that no one in the NBA can match of picks. So how do they go about best managing those assets and getting this team to where they want to get to?
It's going to be fascinating to see. I think that they're going to be the most interesting offseason team for the next few off seasons because you look at it, they have to spend money this summer because you have to spend 90% of the cap by opening night. And so they need to take care of Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins. Like, I think that they're going to reject Wiggins' team contract and then re-sign him as they did for Lou Dort earlier, a couple off seasons ago. So I think that they'll pay Wiggins. I think they could work something out with Isaiah Joe. But how do you get better externally? It's going to be a balancing act, though, because you saw how good J-Dub was from year 1 to year 2, taking a leap. Now you're going to see Chet develop internally. You're going to see J-Dub continue to develop internally. So what do you put around these guys? I think everything's on the table for Oklahoma City. I think that they can make a huge, big splash and go make a move that Woj drops a tweet and the world of the NBA has changed forever. I think that they can also evaluate the marketplace and just wait it out. Because I think that we're going to put a lot of pressure on them this summer. But look at the Dallas Mavericks, who went and made a move in the offseason to go get Grant Williams. They went and traded for Derek Lively. They went and got some marginal pieces. It didn't work, and then they used the deadline to pivot. And the Thunder are going to have so many points that they can pivot that they can afford to go make some moves this summer, even if they don't necessarily work, because they have all these kind of get-out-of-jail-free cards. I think that the Thunder will make a move where you're gonna text me and have me back on the show this summer.
Stay up to date on the Oklahoma City Thunder all year by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Thunder on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, T. Higgins won't be at Bengals OTAs, but that doesn't mean he's going to get traded. Before we get to why, we had a Game 7 on the ice last night. It's winner take all in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. It's a foregone conclusion that the Celtics will win the NBA championship, right? So the Eastern Conference Finals matchup with the Pacers should be a cakewalk. FanDuel agrees and has the Celtics as major favorites to win the series, minus 950 to win the conference finals. That is crazy. Meanwhile, if you like the Pacers as the underdog to knock off the prohibitive favorite, you can get them at plus 660. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll never miss an episode. Our two favorite words this time of year, Game 7. The Oilers lit the Lambs 3 times in the second period, and though the Canucks made a game of it late, they ultimately fell short. We're going to talk about T. Higgins missing Bengals OTAs, but the Vikings will be missing their big-time wideout from OTAs as well. Justin Jefferson is in talks with Minnesota about a contract extension, but he was not at the team facility on Monday. Jefferson also didn't participate in the earlier portion of the Vikings' voluntary offseason program at the draft. Vikings GM Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah led everyone to believe the team was close to a new deal with their superstar receiver. Despite injuries, Jefferson went over 1,000 receiving yards in just 10 games last year. Given wide receiver contracts, this is going to be a big one. And Jefferson may just be the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL when this deal gets done. To no one's surprise, Victor Wembanyama, the unanimous selection to the NBA All-Rookie team as the league announced on Monday. When someone wins Rookie of the Year unanimously, you can figure it will be the same for the All-Rookie team. Joining Wemby, Chet Holmgren, Brandon Miller, Jaime Jaquez Jr., and Brandon Pajemski. Holmgren was also a unanimous selection as he was the runner-up for Rookie of the Year. Over on the diamond, the Marlins slipped by the Brewers in extras.
5 walk-off wins. This team has won 16 games all year. Literally just about one of every 3 games is a walk-off win for the Miami Marlins. What is up, Fish fans? My name is Jim Greasehaber. Call me Grease. We are here on your Monday evening as the Marlins get this 3-game series against the first-place Milwaukee Brewers off to a good start. with a beautiful victory, 3-2 in the MIA. Yeah, the offense hasn't been good. Yes, Ryan Weathers was very good again, starting this game on the mound for the Marlins, and that was something they hadn't gotten over the last couple of games, was an outstanding outing from their starting pitcher. They got it today from Weathers. Will they get it tomorrow from Trevor Rogers for the second time in a row? We don't know, but we do know that we got it from Weathers tonight.
While the drama brews in the NBA and NHL playoffs, we have a little bit of drama in the NFL. T. Higgins still hasn't signed his franchise tag tender, not eligible to participate in offseason activities. And we don't know what the future of T. Higgins is in Cincinnati, at least for the moment. To help shed some light on all of this, Jake Liscow from Locked on Bengals joins us now. And Jake, this is weird because it's mostly status quo at this point with T. Higgins. How much closer does it seem like we are to a resolution in all of this?
The resolution will come toward the end of training camp, or maybe right after training camp at the end of the preseason. T. Higgins will not forfeit the $20+ million that the franchise tag guarantees to him. He'll show up and he'll sign the tender and he'll play out the season. I don't think that anyone's going to take the Le'Veon Bell path with the franchise tag anytime soon after seeing how it went for Bell at the time. And the Bengals, I think the time to trade him has passed if they were ever entertaining it. And I don't think they ever seriously were, or the offers they received weren't close to enough to move a notoriously stubborn front office. So being as we're dealing with the same agent that the Bengals just went through this with Jesse Bates a couple of years ago, I would expect it to go a very similar way. Toward the end of training camp, T. Higgins will show up and they'll get ready for week 1. And until then, I don't think that the Bengals will see T. Higgins. I don't think that he will show up and sign the franchise tag and do any of the offseason program. Obviously, has been reported. And I don't think he'll be there for the beginning of training camp either. I think that would be an upset at this point. And I also don't think that the Bengals and T. Higgins are any closer to finding a long-term extension. That would also be an upset at this point.
So let's say it's likely, and we're just speculating for this hypothetical, but let's just say it's unlikely that the Bengals are going to meet the T. Higgins number. Is it worth it then to just take one last ride with this? Let's say they've got a nice record at the trade deadline and just ride this out and lose him for whatever next offseason comp pick versus trying to maximize whatever value he has during the 2024 season.
The way the market's going, it wouldn't shock me to see the Bengals at least think about using the second consecutive year franchise tag, which is rarely done.
Yeah.
But for the number that it would be for T. Higgins, somewhere around $25 million, if things go well this year and T plays well, that is leverage that the Bengals have. And maybe that is what eventually leads to the trade. But I don't see the Bengals feeling incentivized to move on from T at any point before the franchise tag year is up, unless things go wildly off the rails and something goes catastrophically wrong. The expectations are that T. Higgins is going to be an important piece for the offense that is getting his quarterback back. And when Joe Burrow was healthy for like those 3 games he was healthy last year, the Bengals looked like the elite team we thought they would be going into the season. Obviously, a lot needs to happen between now and the regular season for the Bengals and the league to feel like that's where Joe Burrow is, and missing T. Higgins for the training camp and offseason workout part of the team building process and install process for 2024 isn't ideal by any means, but they feel like, and I think at least somewhat justifiably so, that T. Higgins is a piece that will help them compete for that Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, and under the old CBA, it was not uncommon for us to see guys get tagged multiple times, consecutive years. We saw Anthony Spencer with the Cowboys do it. Walter Jones once got tagged 3 straight years. The new CBA has tried to make that a little bit more prohibitive. But to your point, with the money that is getting paid to these receivers, if you don't have to pay somebody at the top of the market, you're probably getting a discount. Yeah,
and that's, I guess, the one benefit to them getting the tag in this year and the way that the market tends to or has tended to be kind of exploding in a way that is outpacing the franchise tag. Next year's tag for T doesn't have anything to do with the top of the receiver market. It's just an increase year over year based on this year's tag. So the Bengals do have that chip I was a little surprised that they didn't just leverage that in extension talks and say, hey, look, this is what the franchise tag is for 2 years. We'll beat that number for 2 years, and here's what we'll do for a third year or maybe a fourth year, depending on how many years T. Higgins wanted to negotiate on that contract. And it didn't go that way, obviously, but in the Bengals' back pocket, they have that second franchise tag. And one way that we've speculated this could go, since we saw the early tag on Higgins, that was kind of a sign that this wasn't heading toward an extension resolution, at least in the future before 2024, was, well, they could just explore a tag and trade next year then. And it would, because it might cost them a little bit more than they're comfortable with on that second straight tag, but they do have that option and can use that and kind of weaponize it, which is not ideal for the player by any means, and something that wouldn't surprise me to see addressed in the future CBA. But for now, that is in the CBA and is a tool in the Bengals toolkit.
Stay up to date on the Cincinnati Bengals all year by subscribing to Locked On Sports today and Locked On Bengals on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Nuggets just didn't have the legs for a repeat. The Denver Nuggets repeat bid is over. As Locked On Nuggets host Matt Moore says, it was because the Wolves had the legs and the Nuggets didn't.
The Wolves had more in the tank, and the Wolves were able to be better later in the game. Congrats to the Minnesota Timberwolves. They are an awesome team. I love watching the squad. This is the best defense I've seen in 20 years. This is a phenomenal squad. I love their chemistry. I'm so happy for Karl Anthony Towns, when I've been one of the few guys that's been like, no, like, he wants to win. He just doesn't know how to do it. I've been the guy that said that about him. I've defended Rudy Gobert this season and said how he's gotten better. I think Anthony Edwards is amazing. I love Mike Conley. I've done that forever. Congrats to them. They were the better team, and they won this series. The point differential proves that out. Going to talk about point differential, by the way. All of those things are absolutely true. And the biggest reason the Nuggets lost a 20-point lead and choked in Game 7 is because the Minnesota Timberwolves kicked their ass. They challenged every possession, and they had more at the end of the game. For the last, honestly, I don't know. Let's see. It's May. 2 months. For the last 2 months, the Nuggets have been trying to get by. That the quest for a repeat was draining for them. We're going to talk a lot about that in the second segment, about what the cause of that was. But if you look in this game and you want to know exactly what happened, the Nuggets burned so much energy in building their lead. And they played so great in the second quarter. Like, that did happen, and that matters. The Nuggets were not killed this entire game. They built a 20-point lead, which makes the collapse that much worse.
This is an interesting framing of what, in the old days, and by the old days, I mean like 3 years ago, we would just call a choke. The Nuggets, who were the defending champions, who a lot of the biggest Jokic fans in the national media and the local media made it seem like this team was inevitable. They were the defending champions. They were going to figure this out because they had Jokic. He's a supercomputer, and everything is going to be fine. They blow at home as the favorite, the largest Game 7 halftime lead ever. They blow a 20-point lead at home with the MVP. This isn't legs versus no legs, although that is, of course, true. The Timberwolves looked faster, more dynamic. They were swarming to the ball defensively. They played with more verve offensively. They're the younger team, that's true. But Jokic is 29. We're not talking about an old man, though maybe at some point we should talk about the conditioning that he does or doesn't have, and not just, oh, isn't it cute that he doesn't really care in the offseason, he goes and plays with his horses. It hasn't mattered because he's been the MVP 3 times and won a title. It hasn't mattered until it mattered. They choked this game away. And I want to add one more thing here. Playoff performance is not supposed to affect the way that we look at regular season awards. But that's just not true. That hasn't been the practical impact of playoff performance on regular season awards. But when you go back and you look, we've seen it with James Harden. We've seen it with Giannis Antetokounmpo. I do not think we will see it with Nikola Jokic, that this team choked Game 7 at home, blew a 3-2 series lead with the MVP on the team, it won't affect Nikola Jokic one iota in the eyes of the national media, because it's become a badge of honor to talk about what a savant he is, how special he is, how much better he is than everyone else. Except now 3 MVPs, just 1 title. And the Nuggets have never in a playoff series beaten a team that's been a 4 seed or higher, that's won 50 games. At some point, that stuff has to matter, even if Nikola Jokic has still been good in the postseason. Giannis was incredible in the postseasons, and the inability for the team to get over the hump was still put on his broad shoulders. I'm wondering if they're going to keep that same energy for Nikola Jokic. You know what? I'm not wondering it. They won't. I know they won't. And finally, Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns were having some fun, reminiscing after Game 7. And they were asked a bizarre question, one so bizarre they could not hold back.
And usually in NBA history, it says you have to lose and lose big before you win. What is it about this team that says
we lost last year?
Yeah, but that's different. You have to lose at a bigger stage. Usually, teams usually.
It's the playoffs. We lost last year.
We lost the last 2 years.
God, how much more we got to lose?
Yeah, how much you want us to lose?
Been losing for 20 years.
I need those 2 in a buddy cop movie stat. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, we'll see just how bad the Celtics will beat the Pacers in Game 1. So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.